And I think we're ready to start. Are you guys ready?
Yep.
I want to know if everybody's ready for the end of the school year and excited about summer and having a break and something different. This morning I spent, I spent all morning and half the afternoon. I think I have about 11 of the 25 or 20 or whatever it is. Draft 2's gone through. So be sure and look at your feedback. Do you know how to see the feedback? I had a couple of people that weren't real sure about it. And then do you know how to open the rubrics to look at your rubric scores when I use the rubric on the next one? You know how to open the rubrics?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anybody that does not know? Okay, so I'm just going to assume that everybody knows things. So, just some things I saw on Blackboard this time when I was looking at those. When you have 3 authors on a citation in Blackboard, your first citation, I'm going to share my screen. As soon as I find the right one to share. Too many things open. Okay, so you can see, so the first time, like if you were citing a textbook, you would cite it like this. Then after that, with 3 authors, after you've cited it that way the first time, then you can do it like this. Okay, but the first time you have to list all 3 of the folks. And when you're doing your references, because you will have references on your instructional plan, when you list the name of a book or the title of an article, only the first letter is capitalized. And if there's a colon or a question mark or something like, or some other punctuation, the first word after that punctuation is capitalized. Even though you've been taught the other way, that's MLA, where you capitalize every word and you underline them. With APA, it's only the first word that you capitalize. So just a FYI, now that I finally gotten hold of the Keystone, the IEP that most web kids that most people are using, I was told the other day that Keystone's not going to continue to support web kids, and so in the fall, you probably have a different format for an IEP if you use web kids. So you're going to have to learn something different, which isn't all terrible, because you're going to get kids moving into your district, and they're going to come with some of them may come with IEPs, and if they do, you need to be able to dig out that information. So the things that you need to look for, you're going to look for their service time, you're going to look for their goals and their checklist or the benchmarks and the strategies that they were using. So it's all the same information, it just looks different and it's in different places, but it all has to be there because it's a federal law. So these were some of the things that I saw when I was looking through the drafts today, and I don't know that I caught it on every single one, so I wanted to go over a little bit again. Supplementary services are things like maybe mobility training or sign language and stuff. Related services are like speech, OT, PT, and none of the kids that are on the case studies that you're using do you need any of those services. And I know several people put social emotional goal or special counseling for Bethany, the 4th grader on the case study. My gut reaction is if she were instructed at her readiness level, all those behaviors that she's having, the frustrations would go away. And so she wouldn't need those kinds of things. I don't know that she would need something special. It might just be, a 5-minute cool down when she gets frustrated, but I don't know that it's serious enough that she'd need to be seen by a social worker, because it's just started since she started getting frustrated because the work's too hard. If the work's at her level, chances are it will go away. So sometimes I try not to make mountains out of molehills and try something first before I adjust it, do a whole lot of adjustments. Several people put that they would have reading, like when they're in the accommodation or the assessments, the 2 boxes on state assessments and district-wide assessments. Several people put that they would do like reading and math and that they would read those assessments. Most of the time you cannot read a reading assessment to a student because you can't assess the reading ability if you're reading it to them. Sometimes on some, I'm trying to remember which ones, but on some of them you can read the questions to the student, but you can't read the content as far as the paragraphs, the passages. So the easiest way to write is this right here. You can either write where allowable or when permissible, and then that covers it. Okay, so you can add that. I think there's still quite a bit of confusion between percent and percentile. I saw several people that wrote like in standard scores. I mean, that all kind of goes together. Like the standard score, they wrote 84 out of 100. Well, a standard score doesn't mean 84 out of 100. 84 out of 100 means you got 84 questions right out of 100 possible. A standard score goes back to that norm, that curve, that bell-shaped curve on the norm table. And 100 is average on the standard score. And on percent is either, I started using, you're not supposed to use the word you're defining in the definition. So a percent is the part of something. So a percent would be like 22% of, correct out of 100. But a percentile means a rank. It's like if you have a 22nd percentile, that means that you scored or did better than 21 other kids out of the 100. So do you understand the distinction between those three? Does that make sense? Okay. I didn't require it on these IEPs, but on IEPs, I mean, I kind of did, but I'm not focusing on it real heavy. But on IEPs that you're writing for real, you need to have peer comparison. Like if you use the DIBELS and you say that they're reading at so many words per minute, then you need to put a peer comparison in there. What are their peers? How fast are their peers reading? Because that gives parents a really good idea of the difference in where they're functioning and where their typical peers are, so they can see either where they're ahead or whether they're behind. So it's a good clarification for parents. On Ames Web, the peer comparisons are pretty easy. You can do that through the percentiles. And you can look them up. I mean, you can always Google what's the average, what's words per minute for a 4th grade student, on reading fluency, and you'll get all kinds of tables. So your goals should correspond to your areas of weakness. And if you don't cite something as a weakness, you're not going to have accommodations in that area nor goals. Several people had written in some things on written expression or spelling differences and things like that. Unless you have a language, unless you change that reading goal to a language arts goal, excuse me, chances are you shouldn't have something different in spelling there, because that's more language arts than reading based. Excuse me. Okay, I'm gonna lose my voice. I had laryngitis last week and I couldn't talk for 4 days, and my husband thoroughly enjoyed the peace and quiet. Then I went to campus for 3 days and scored for comps, and he was just in 7th heaven. And he had a whole week of peace and quiet, and it's like, I can't do that again. Anyway, on your vision and hearing, I asked you to put in the dates for the screening, and on the WebKids version, it asks for a follow-up date. And so if you're going to use that one, just remember that vision is screened every 2 years, hearing is screened every 3, because your eyes tend to change more often than does your hearing. In the educational placement box, do you know which box I'm talking about on your IEP? On the one that's on the web, it's highlighted on the KSDE form. It's got the word "not" highlighted in yellow. On educational placement, you only write what the other students are doing while your student is removed from the classroom. And that's an if your student is removed from the classroom. If you're going to do all in-class support, then you just say the student is included with their peers 100% of the time, or all throughout the school day, or something to that effect. The only thing that you're going to put in there, and you're not going to say it's not applicable, you're just going to say the student is served, or is receive services when they're with their peers. They remain with their peers throughout the school day. For your accommodations, accommodations have got to be more specific, and in the box when it talks about accommodations at the top, it talks about frequency, location, and duration. So you have to be more specific and say for the life of the IEP or for 36 instructional weeks or whatever it is, you know, and where the accommodation is going to be given. Is it in the special ed classroom or the general ed classroom? And how long is it going to last? Such as if it's for a test, is it for the length of the test? And on extended time, you have to specify how much. If you're giving someone an accommodation for extended time on a test, you can say extended time by 1.5 times, by double time, by triple time. Somebody was creative enough to write for the duration of the test plus the next class period, so which is essentially double time. But I mean, that's specific enough. So you have to tell how long your extended time is. Several IEPs had school psychs and OTs and PTs and speech people and different people listed as kind of like they threw everything that could possibly be at the IEP meeting. At this IEP meeting, the only people that are required are the parents, the general ed teacher, the special ed teacher, and the LEA representative, because it's those are the ones that are required by law. On a 3-year reeval, you may have a school psych there to interpret the test results. If you're considering speech services, you might have a speech pathologist there, or OT or PT, but only if those are called for. And in none of the case studies you have are they necessary, so don't put them on there. On the service time or the services that are listed, paraprofessional services, and I know if you look at that KSDE manual, it says paraprofessional services are supplementary services. That has since been changed through the court system. So instead of listing para services as separate time, it all goes into special ed time. It's just one lump of time. And it can be, instead of saying paraprofessional in the class, you would just call it in-class support. Okay, so that was from the IEPs. Those are the most common, most frequent mistakes I've seen. Do you have any questions about those?
You said you had 11 of the 20 or whatever graded. Do you know when you'll have the rest of those done?
I'm hoping by noon tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sure. You know, that's if I can. It takes me a while by the time I download them and then re-upload them and save them and everything. So it takes a while to go through them. And this time I did download them and I did put the marks in the review mode. And so then I set them up as an attachment. So if you have questions about anything that the marks through in there, let me know and I'll work with you. You know, we can email back and forth about it. Okay? They've been really good, by the way. I've been very impressed. So we need to talk about the instructional plan for a little bit. Have you started on your instructional plans? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, so let me pull up this other page. Maybe.
Did you add a draft due for that? Because I didn't see it on the original schedule, but then it was added, I don't know, just the other day when I checked again.
It is there as a place to submit something, or it's not there?
No, on the original schedule that was posted at the beginning of the semester, it didn't say that there was an instructional plan draft due like this Sunday. But then because I have it, the original one printed, and it's not on there, but I checked after you sent the announcement last night or yesterday, whenever it was, and it said that it was on there. So I just wondered if you added it, because I was kind of freaking out. But
I think I did add it, and I think that is my mistake, and I'm not going to hold you accountable for that. When I taught this last time, the first part of the semester, it was in 7 weeks instead of 9. because of the way spring break fell, so I had to take it out, and I think I forgot to put it back in. Okay? So if you can have your draft done, I need to look at the due dates on everything. So I don't want to foul you up on it. Okay, your final copy of your draft of your instructional plan is due May the 16th. Okay, your final IEP is due May the 12th, and I know that's only 4 days apart, but you've already submitted your IEP twice. So this one is just making some corrections. It should be no big deal. Okay, and if you want to submit your IEPs early, I will grade as I can time-wise. I have the draft due May the 5th, which is this Sunday, isn't it? I think the reason I added it so early is because it takes quite a while to go through those, and if you want feedback on them, then I need some time to do that, because it takes me a couple of days to get them done. So if you can, let me look at the rest of my calendar. I'm trying to come up with a date that's fair to you guys. If you can get me your drafts by you can have your drafts turned in by the 10th, which is next Friday. I can probably have them back to you by Tuesday, which gives you 2 days just to make corrections and resubmit. Is that good enough? So I've got to have a sticky note here. Okay, so the draft is due on the 10th, right? Is that what I said? At midnight? And that gives me a little bit of time to get them graded, or not graded, but reviewed. Will that work for everybody? If you need more time than that, you can have more time. I'm just not sure that I'll have time to review them. Okay? And the drafts are only worth 1 point. If you're pretty sure you're spot on, I don't care if you submit a draft. If you want to just go straight for the final copy, that's okay too. That's totally up to you. Okay? You're not going to get feedback on your final copy of the instructional plan other than a score and the rubric. That's as good as I can do on that. I won't be able to go through and mark them. But if I go through them and mark them starting on the 10th and have them back to you by Tuesday, by Monday, I don't know. I'm thinking this is Mother's Day weekend and graduations. I'll get them back as quickly as I can so that you can get them submitted. All right. I can't make promises right now because I'm not sure what all it's going to look like and how much time they're going to take. Anyway, so let's go through just so that you're on top of this instructional plan.
So basically what you're saying for that instructional plan is the earliest we can get it in, the better.
Absolutely.
But the 10th is the last day that we'll be able to have it checked prior to the final.
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So there are, on the instructional plan, it is an APA paper. So you need a cover page, title page, whatever you call it. You need running headers and page numbers on it. You need an abstract, and I don't score the abstract, but just to practice what writing an abstract. And an abstract is a roadmap. It's kind of like a summary of what's in your paper. It's up to 250 words at the most. And you're going to, it's a short. It can be a short paragraph that says, "This is an instructional plan." This is a special education instructional plan for name your case study student. Included in this plan is, and talk about the five topics that you're going to do. The overview of the student, the gap analysis, the evidence-based instruction, the service time, and then progress monitoring. I mean, it can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be really elaborate. Doesn't have to go into detail because the detail comes in the paper. It's just how many of you have read a research article out of a journal or someplace? You know the introduction part, the very first abstract part, and how brief it is? That's what yours should be. Because you don't have research to quote, and because you don't have a big case study, like a big research study that you did, it's going to be a lot shorter than what those would be on that you look at in a journal article. It's just a prep thing to get you practiced up for them. Okay? Okay, so there are five headings in this paper. The first one, and this is posted in Blackboard. So the first one is the overview of the student and the goal selected. Your goal needs to be stated word for word straight off of your IEP that you wrote. And you're going to have two goals, right? You have a reading goal for everybody's either done Bethany or Jason. So if it's Bethany, you're going to say Bethany's reading goal is with a colon and then put what it is. And her math goal is with a colon, and copy paste those goals straight in there. Okay. In the overview, it's kind of similar to the, you're going to include some of the parent concerns, you know, in the current performance part of the IEP where you talk about her strengths and her weaknesses, you know, as far as her interests. And, you know, with Bethany, it's her obsession with Disney characters. With Jason, you're going to talk about his ability to, you know, talk his way out of a paper bag. I mean, those kinds of things, you know, they're strengths. Then the gap analysis is going to be 2 or 3 paragraphs. And it needs to be at least 1 paragraph on reading and 1 paragraph on math. Or if you're talking about Jason, it's going to be 1 paragraph on reading and 1 paragraph on his organizational skills. And maybe how ADHD impacts some of the things he's doing. You know, not being able to focus, which ends up looking like lack of organizational skills. So in your gap analysis, you're going to talk about the assessments that were in the textbooks and in the course activities. Like if you cite CBMs, then you need to have it in your references. So it's going to be an APA in there. When you look up DIBELS, because you're going to use, if you're using DIBELS, and where you see the patterns for the reading or the reading rate, you know, you need a citation for DIBELS. So all you have to do you know how to find the citation on the web? If I do that, I don't know if my screen will keep sharing while I do this. Is my screen still sharing? No, it's not. Okay, if I were going to use, what's one of the assessments that were in there on either one of the kids? Woodcock Johnson, right?
DIBELS was on there too.
Okay, was DIBELS on? Okay, I was thinking DIBELS. Okay, so I'll look at DIBELS. Okay, so there's the title of it, right? And you can see it was by the University of Oregon. See if we can find it. But sometimes you have to play with it a couple of times to find the correct one. Okay, here you go, 8th edition. So it would be DIBELS 8th edition, and then I'm not sure, and then it's going to be by University of Oregon. There's your copyright date at the bottom. And it's published by the University of Oregon. Okay, and if you're not sure, all you have to do is do a search. Who published? And it'll pop up, University of Oregon. Or here it is, Dr. Roland Good and Dr. Ruth Kaminsky. Okay. So just search for it if you're not sure. That's how I do it. All right. Oh, I gotta go back and find my page. Okay, so you're going to talk about the gap. Now remember, if you're working with a student with a high incidence disability, there's a gap between where the student's functioning and where you want them to be. And really bring out that gap about how far behind they are. If you would happen to be doing a student who's gifted, you're going to talk about where their peers are and where they are and how you want to widen that gap. Because gifted, you want them to keep progressing and progressing and progressing, and they're going to go faster than their classmates. But a student with a high incidence disability you're going to try and catch them up. It's hard to catch them up completely, but you're going to try to make progress. The next section, on here, let me go back to the gap analysis just a minute. Try to make up a few simple examples that are not too outlandish, that kind of show what the student's doing. Like if you are working with Jason, you might pretend like you worked a couple of math problems because he's struggling in math. So focus on that. Or talk specifically about his organizational skills and how it's affecting his grades. Okay, so then the third section is evidence-based instructional practice selected. And on these headers, they're numbered here because there's 5 of them. But in your paper, they're not numbered, and this is in bold type, and it's in the center of your paper, and then you then you end it, and you start your paragraph. Just so you know the format. Okay. So the next section is evidence-based instructional practices selected, and you need at least a paragraph on reading and 1 paragraph on, if it's Jason, organizational skills, or if it's Bethany, 1 paragraph on math. So this is the strategies that you're going to pick. You're going to use your textbook for this course, or the stuff that I posted that's been posted in Blackboard to pick your strategies. You're not going to use strategies you use in your classroom, strategies that you find on the internet, or strategies a friend's using. It has to come from your textbook or information that's been posted in Blackboard. And you have to cite it. So when you're talking about a strategy, if you're talking about, I'm trying to think of one. If I'm talking about read alouds with students and improving their reading fluency, I might describe a strategy from the textbook that talks about where we do, excuse me, group reading, where I read a paragraph, then the student reads a paragraph when we're reading out of anything. I read a paragraph, the student reads a paragraph. Excuse me. And I'm going to tell why I would use that strategy. And I'll name it from whatever they've called it in the textbook. Anyway, so I've explained what it looks like when somebody else is watching me do it, so the parents could tell, or a teacher at a receiving school could tell what strategy you're using. And because they need to know how and what the strategy is and what the purpose of it is. And so the purpose of that strategy is the student is getting to hear appropriate fluency and stress on words, beginning and end punctuation, how you stop it, your phrasing when you're reading out loud. They're getting to see vocabulary words said out loud before they mispronounce them. So so you've got a rationale for why you're picking your strategy. And then you do the same thing for math. So you're going to describe it a little bit. The next thing, my clock's going to strike, just a sec. Sorry about that. Okay, then the next part is we're going to talk about placement, frequency, intensity, and length for the intervention, or if it's a gifted student for the enrichment. So in 1 or 2 paragraphs, and you can put your reading time and your math time together, that's fine, but you have to say for reading and math. And really, it's a pretty short paragraph. You know, you're going to talk about what services the student's getting, where the services are offered, the frequency as in how often, the location, where, and the duration. And the duration is for how many weeks. So your instruction, so it could be, you know, she receives 60 minutes, the student receives, and you would name your student, 60 minutes of direct instruction in the resource room for 60 minutes, 5 days a week for 36 instructional weeks. In that time, 30 minutes will be devoted to math instruction, 30 minutes will be devoted to reading instruction. Or if you're doing it in the general ed classroom, it would be, some people call it pushing services, some people call it in-class support. It's the same thing. Either term works just fine. Does that make sense? Okay, and it's because an IEP is written for 1 calendar year minus a day. It's for 36 instructional weeks or for the life of the IEP. Because we don't stop short. We go the full length of the IEP. Okay, so you're gonna base this paragraph on the gap that you talked about in your gap analysis. You know, how much needs to be done, and realistically, how much can you get done? You know, if Bethany is 2 years behind in reading and 2 years behind in math, chances are she's not going to gain 2 full years in 1 year's service time. Correct? So think about the fact that that's probably not going to happen. Okay? Okay, then the next section, people are really good at writing about progress monitoring. How often are you going to evaluate the student on her progress? It should be every 3 weeks. You can do informal stuff weekly, but you should, like if you're doing reading fluency or reading rate, every 3 weeks is on a CBM or Ames Web is pretty appropriate. With Jason, you might monitor his grades weekly or his completion rate weekly. So you're going to describe how you're going to monitor that progress. So you might have a paragraph for reading and might have a paragraph for math. One of the things, if you look at the rubric, says, how do you share that information with the students? So be sure that you include in this paragraph how the student's going to see their own progress. Like, is Bethany going to watch you chart her progress, or is she going to help you chart her progress, or keep track of how many words she gets right, or how many math problems she gets right, or something like that? So think about how you're going to share that information with the student and include that. And then the last part is the part most people tend to forget, and it dings and points big time. Well, not big time, but it dings in quite a few points. What happens if they're not making progress? After 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 9 weeks, they kind of stagnate out and they're not doing any better than they were before. What are you going to do? And calling an IEP meeting is not the answer that I'm looking for. Okay, the answers that I think are important that you should consider are you going to change the location of the services? Maybe instead of in-class support, you're going to do some pull-out time. Are you going to change the duration, the intensity of the services? Like instead of being 60 minutes, are you going to go to 90 minutes? Are you going to have additional in-class support and do some additional pull-out? Are you going to think about changing strategies? If you're going to change strategies, one of the things to remember, did I show you the implementation dip? Have I shown you that? No? I'm getting some blank looks. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
That graph was was typing in my computer.
What, baby?
The cat was typing in my computer.
What images? Can you see this implementation dip? Is that showing? No, I didn't think so. I thought I screwed it up. Darn it. Okay, now can you see this implementation dip? So when you first start out, this is where you're going along. And when you start something new, it always drops down. And this happens of new teachers, by the way, Taylor. Didn't you say this was your first year?
It is.
Okay. So you start out in August and you're going along pretty good, and about November you go, oh my gosh, this is a lot of work and I am so tired and it's overwhelming, and so you plummet. And then about March, you can see the end of the tunnel and you start coming back and you do better. Well, it's the same thing with kids when you implement something new. They go along for just a little bit and then they're doing okay, and then they start dropping. So when you look at that implementation dip and you're thinking about like a strategy for reading or math or something, think about the fact that they may get worse before they get better, and then they'll come back up. Because see how strong you come up later? So if in 3 weeks they haven't made much progress, it's okay. But in 6 or 9 weeks, if they're still at the same place, then you need to consider doing something different. Okay? So just keep in mind that implementation is, and I see this especially in behavior kids, when you're working on behavior plans with kids. They're doing okay, and then the honeymoon's over and boom, the reality sets in. And then when you start trying to do replacement behaviors, it's really hard for a while until they start getting the swing of it and they know it's going to be consistent, and then they'll start getting better.
One of my biggest frustrations is like with new interventions and things that we're trying, teachers don't wait long enough. You have to give them a chance to struggle a little bit, get used to the new,
Yes.
and then see if they make gains. I have so many teachers that we have, not only our SIT team, but we also have a behavior team, and we just recommend interventions and things, and they'll come back to the next meeting a month later and they're, oh, I did that for 3 days and it didn't work. Well, of course it didn't work. You tried it for 3 days.
Hey, they're miracle workers, and if the miracle doesn't happen, let's move on to the next one, right?
It's so frustrating.
It is frustrating, and I think the thing that you have to keep in mind is they truly care about the kids doing well, and they're frustrated because the students with them and they're not achieving the way they want them to, and they don't have time or they don't know how to help. And even though it may be your first or 50th year in the classroom, you are the expert. And so they look to you to fix it. So that's what's happening, Jessica, is they want them to work with you because you have the expertise to help all kids. So consider it a compliment, okay?
One thing I've learned, and I've even just training paras, you have to train the teacher or you have to train the para first before they can even begin to train the kids. I had to train myself first on implementing and how to do it and being consistent. And that's one thing I have learned. And it's hard when you're trying to teach another adult to grasp the concept of how this plan is going to work.
Well, and the other part of that is when you're working with kids, you have fewer in your classroom to work with than they do. And they have all this stuff all this information they're supposed to be helping kids learn. And they've got, I don't know what your class sizes are, 15, 17, 20 or more. And being able to focus on one student's needs is really hard compared to focusing on a whole classroom. And so even though they may know what you're saying is right, knowing it and doing it are not always the same thing.
No.
You know, and I firmly believe all teachers are there because they care about kids and they want kids to learn. And yes, sometimes they frustrate the daylights out of me, But it's all for a good cause. It's because they want kids to be successful. So anyway, so that is the instructional plan. Do you have any questions about that? Yeah, go ahead. Turn on your mic. Yeah.
And in the IP, we in our SMART goals, we included how often we will be measuring the goals. So is that how often we're going to be doing our progress monitoring, right?
Yep.
So if there's, I think I wrote like bi-weekly. So if there's something to be fixed, you're going to let us know, because I will link my instructional plan to the goal of the IEP and the progress monitoring to that one. Okay.
Absolutely, that's right.
All right.
That's the reason we do the instructional plan after the second draft of the IEP, is so that you can see, because there is some, so much of this information comes directly from that IEP. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. And so then the last thing I said, that was all there is to the instructional plan. So then you're going to have a separate page that goes with this. It's your references. All of the works that you cited in the text, you're going to have a reference page on the bottom at the end. And your works go in alphabetical order according to the first author's last name. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I created a really wimpy one last semester because I had some people that just didn't quite understand. I did a pretend case study, I did an IEP, and I did an instructional plan. And it's not complete, but I can attach it to the announcements this time. And know that it's not complete, that it's not hitting on all the parts, because I did it in about an hour and a half one night for somebody. But it'll give you an idea of what it's going to look like. Would that be helpful? Okay.
Yes.
I'll stick it on there. Okay. That is all of the information that I really have. I do, if you want. Does anybody have seniors? Do you know how to do the exit outcomes for the State Department, Casey? Would you like to see that? Okay, it won't take, I say it won't take very long. Let me go back. Oh, good, I'm logged out. Okay, so when you have a senior graduating, you have to go to this page. It's the KSDE homepage. On the right, excuse me, you look through the columns and you want the one that says authenticated applications. And you have to create, you have to register. So I have a cheater because you have to re-register every stinking year. And so our special ed director lets us use hers. Let me see if I can find it. I knew I wouldn't be able to right now. If I can find, I have to find her login real quick. Just take me a second. Okay, so I'm not going to share her. or login and password with you guys, because you'll have to create your own, or maybe your administrator will. Okay. So after I did the authentication page that I just showed you, right? Okay. You have to accept. Then you go to Outcomes Post-School. And then on your kids, and then you go to Post-School Survey. And then you have to have the kids' number off their IEP. And I don't happen to have a kid's number. But anyway, you just copy and paste it off your IEP into there, and then you click Get Student, and your student will pop up. There's a page with 3 tabs on it that you have to fill out.
I don't think the screen that you want us to see is showing up.
Oh, darn. There. Can you see? Get Student. So here's the kid's ID, and then the Get Student. Okay. So copy paste their ID in there, and then next, the next tab, and I can't do it without putting a real kid in, so I'm not going to do that because it's a breach of confidentiality. There's a page with 3 tabs. There's one tab that's filled out with parent information, phone number, and address. The second page, or the third page, is the student's address, phone number, and then a page on what they're going to do. I mean, it's like 3 questions on each page. Are they going to college? Are they going straight to work? And who's filling out this form? And you put your name and special educator. Okay?
Thank you. I would have never known about that probably until it was like due. So thank you.
And you can do it now. I mean, because if you know your kids are graduating for sure or aging out, you can fill it out now. You don't have to wait till graduation or in the school year. Okay? Okay, then the other thing is, let me go back to I think I have it at the bottom. Okay, so in your IEP, you have to have a summary of performance for graduating seniors or students that are leaving the program. And you don't need to write this down because I'll attach it to the notes. But anyway, you have to talk about the 3 post-school outcomes. You have to talk about one for employment, one for training or education, and one for independent living. Do you know about those? Okay. So
yeah, we were.
Go ahead.
We were actually just we just had a meeting about that. Me and another SPED teacher at our school. We sat down and we started talking about like indicator 13 and stuff.
Oh, good. So you know about it. Okay, so these things are on there. These are the indicator 13 right there that you have to have. Okay. So you can do it in a chart form or not a chart, but a table form, or you can do it in words, as long as you have the information there. And the important thing about that on the transition page that you need it there is when your kids leave you, if they're going to a college program, they will look at this, they will look at the indicator 13 items, and they will, that's how they, excuse me, that's how they make accommodations for them in a secondary, post-secondary institution. That way they don't have to read the whole IEP. It's all on one page, in one spot. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns? Looking at the rest of the class, my gosh, there's 2.5 weeks left or something like that. This has been a very fast semester. Whew. Anyway, so your instructional plan draft last submission day is the 10th if you want feedback. grades are due for me, so you'll, I have to look at my calendar because I never know what I'm doing. I have to turn in grades by the 20th, so you should be able to see them the 21st or 22nd. Okay. If you have less than, I have to look, because if you have less than 26 out of 30 on any of your quizzes, it would be a smart thing to go back and request to retake a quiz. Okay, if you have less than, discussion board 50, so. If you have less than 43 on a discussion board score, you probably ought to go back. Don't put it on discussion board. If you need to add your points on discussion board, you can earn up to the 43, you can earn up to the 85%. I would like those done by Sunday, if you can't by Monday, okay? If you want to add points to it. And discussion board's all graded up to this point. The ones that submitted on the math one that's not due till next Sunday, I've looked at, but I haven't graded because they can't respond to anybody else yet and have it filled completely done. Anyway, if you don't have the points that you need there, instead of, I want you to copy paste what you did on discussion board into a Word document. And then I want you to highlight what you add to it with a yellow highlighter, and then email it to me as an attachment so I can go in and work on your score. Otherwise, I have to go back and reread everything. And this way I can just glance at what you wrote. I can see the changes that are highlighted in yellow, and then I can adjust your score to give you the points that you need. Does that sound okay? I really want you to do well in this class, but I really want you to learn about IEPs. And they're a beast. They get easier with practice. When I first started writing IEPs, okay, I started teaching special ed before there were IEPs. So when I first started writing IEPs, they had to be typed. This was before internet and computers and all that. And then the next version we went to was that carbon paper stuff. And we had, all those carbon papers. You had a page for the school psych, a page for the special ed director, a page for the building administrator, a page for the parent. Like 6 or 7 pages. And by the time you got to the last page that was my copy to work from, it did, unless you were pressing with a chisel and a hammer, it didn't go through. So they were really, really hard to read. But they got better and better and better. And I got faster. I can write an IEP in an hour and a half or 2 probably now. So it does get easier and quicker. I don't know how the other co-ops operate or your districts operate, but we do our own monitoring of our indicator 13s for the co-op, and they ask teachers to come in and review those IEPs. If you get a chance to go in and review somebody else's IEP, jump on it, because that's where I've learned the nice ways of saying tough things. Some people just have a way with words, and you can write down those sentences or those wordings from those hard IEPs and keep a file of it, and it sure does make your life easier. All right? Not the kids' names, but just, instead of saying, oh my God, this kid never sits down, things like, he's very active and he prefers to move around, or never ever use the word lazy when you're talking about a kid, even though you think they might be lazy sometimes. That's really offensive to parents. So you can talk about that you don't think that they always put forth their best effort. So there's some nice ways to say tough things. And you learn those through reading somebody else's IEP sometimes. Anyway, I have enjoyed the class. If you have trouble with anything between now and the end, please email me. Even though I'm doing lots of other, there's lots of stuff going on still. I'm trying to think. I'm still checking emails in the morning and the evening, and I am grading during the day, so I'm sitting at the computer quite a bit still. So holler if you have. And I was looking, It says, so include Plan B or other services. Somebody want to explain what that what that was about? I think it was Jessica, you put that on there?
You were just talking about the progress monitoring section of our instructional plan, and you said to be sure that if they're not making progress, to have
A Plan B.
a contingency plan. So I said put Plan B,
Yes.
or possibly some of the other considerations that typically when you have an IEP meeting, you have those discussions of the different options.
Yeah, it's typically going to be either an increase in service time or intensity of the services. At the beginning on your progress monitoring, you're not typically going to change your strategy. You might change the location, and instead of doing in-class support, you might do direct instruction. So it might be some pull-out time. And any of those kinds of changes, just so you know, you would have to do an IEP meeting to get parent signatures to approve that. But we're just saying, if this plan doesn't work, you're talking about it with the parents, these are the possibilities of things we might be looking at. We're not making those changes now. These are just, you know, in case. Because you cannot move a student without parental permission. You can't change your goal. You can't do anything without written consent. Okay? Anybody have any questions, comments? If you don't, Taylor and I were talking earlier. I'm going to take 3 minutes to say this. How many of you are paying for your own tuition? Okay. I got an email earlier this year from Dean Adams that Kansas Board of Regents had scholarship money. And I was looking for the email to share it with Taylor, and I couldn't find it, but I will find it. The Kansas Board of Regents has some scholarship money for people who are seeking an advanced degree, such as a master's, and hard-to-fill spots, such as the STEM and special ed. If I can locate that information, I should be able to find it by Friday or so. I will forward it to you in an announcement, because you all should be applying for it. Okay? One of the teachers here in Scott City that's a math teacher, you know, of course it's based on taxes and your income and all that, filters out for next fall, and they said, I think it was in December that we got the email, to hurry up and fill it out again. They had extra money in the spring. People hadn't even applied for it. They had extra, so they were going to fund her for 2 years instead of just one. And she said it was enough to pay her tuition. So I'll see if I can't get that information out to you as quickly as possible so you can apply for it for maybe summer or fall. I don't know if they do it in the summer, but I know there's money for fall. So we'll see what I can do to help, okay? And I'll just put it in the announcement. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, have a great rest of the evening. If you need help, let me know, please. Okay?
I have a question, but you may or may not be able to answer it. I don't know. It's about the portfolio.
Okay.
So I was just kind of going through it today because I'm going to write it in the fall, but I wanted to have everything printed and want to use it in my school's copies. But that's not important.
Okay, go ahead.
So I printed everything today, and I was just kind of looking through it. And I've noticed that there are multiple, like, suggested assignments for the different standards that I've never done. And I'm almost done with my coursework.
Which ones are you thinking of in particular?
I don't have the paper with me. It's at school, but I'm trying to think. One was from 867, I think. I only did like 3 assignments in that entire class.
Yeah,
and then like 3 or 4 listed.
Two of those assignments are on there. 867 is the collaboration class. If you did the poster with the poster, that's one of them. That's one of those assignments it's talking about. The other one is that model that you created from the poster where you actually did the school collaborate. Yeah, you had to do it. It was part of the assignments. It hasn't changed. It was part, you did the research thing, whatever it was, this survey, and then you did a lit review as a group, as a pair, and then you did the poster in a group of 4, and then you did a model for collaboration as a single person.
Yeah, I did, for that class, I did 3 assignments. I did the lit review, I did a discussion post over like paraprofessionals, and then I did the parent participations poster, but I didn't do any of those other assignments that you talked about.
Okay, well, the parent participation poster is one of the things that you
Right.
yeah, you can use that one. So so since I started teaching that class, it's been adjusted. Okay, so what are some of the other things that you were worried about? You only have to have a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just, on each section, there was, I think there's, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 different assignments listed. And I went through and just highlighted the ones that I had just to make sure I would have enough. And I was only able to highlight like 2 or 3 assignments on each section because
you only need 2 per section.
But isn't it 2 different per?
I just finished mine and I was approved and mine passed, and and like you, I had trouble because stuff was, I saved things under a different name. So I had a really hard time finding my old things to put in there, but I was able to find enough. And I think in most sections I had 2 really good ones. And there was another one that I thought, there only one section was I able to find 3. And I mean, I still passed because then you have to write a paper saying why you chose the 2, why you think that it fit for that section. And I think that was kind of more of the important piece of it, why that was a good demonstration of your abilities in that particular area.
The page that Stacy's talking about is the reflection part that goes with each section of the portfolio. And in that one page, at the top of that portfolio section for each category, it tells you what CEC standard and what professional learning outcomes for the unit there are. You have to address how your assignment reflects your knowledge of either the CEC standard, well, both the CEC standard and the PLOs. And that is really what you look at quite a bit, because that's the important part. That's why I say on some of these assignments, go back and correct it, like on your IEP, make sure that, because you get graded on writing skills, whether or not they match. There's like 4 or 5 things on each one of the items that you get graded. How appropriate it is for that portfolio submission area. The reflection, whether it connects. I can't remember all of 5 of them, but anyway, you get graded on those, but your grammar and your wording needs to be good. And so when we look at those artifacts that you upload, they need to be correct. As in, like on your instructional plan, try to have the proper citations and all of that. Okay. So do you have all your assignments saved from your classes, Jessica? Okay, then you'll be fine. If you get stuck, send me an email, send me a list of your assignments, and I'll help you. Okay? I don't mind.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Somebody else have a question? Nobody else has got anything to say?
Okay.
Okay. You guys are all good. Have a good rest of the, 2 weeks of school here on campus. And if you need help on anything, let me know and I'll be around. Okay?
Thank you.
Enjoy the class.
Thank you.
Thank you.